Sometimes we want only count or some visible rows, so rows that aren't filtered. In those cases, we can just use subtotal function with suitable number of function on the first argument. And then when we filtered our data, subtotal function will only look at visible, not filtered cells or rows. And just like that, we have proper result. But when we need to add more conditions, so for example, we want to count or sum by manager, we have to use more complicated function. The first solution will use helper column. So in this helper column, we are looking at the current row with subtotal function and we count it. If this row, this value is visible, so isn't filtered, the subtotal will return 1. If it is filtered, it will be 0, but we won't see it in this helper column. And thanks to this column, we can just sum number of project. So let's start with some product function. It is our main function we'll be using. Then we need to check if we have proper manager. So we are in parentheses looking at the whole manager column for locket and we compare it to the current manager. And based on that, we will have array with true and falses, but we need numbers, so we will multiply this array with our helper column for to look. And when we do something like that, we will count numbers of rows. So let's make filter once again, and we have only visible cells count rows count. So we have 4 rows now, but we need to sum it. So some number of projects, so we will add one more array. We can multiply it once again, or we can just add one more argument to some product function, and I will just add one more array and number of project F4 to lock it. Let's copy it down, and once again let's filter our data, and we can see we don't have manager B in autumn collections, so it's 0, and for others we can see not at correct values at 10 for A, 5 for D, and for C we have sum of 3 and 9, so 12. The function works correctly. And if you can have helper column, we can end here. But we have one more solution, formula, big one, that won't need helper column because it creates this helper column inside of itself. And this function formula use offset function. We are looking, let's say, column with collection F4 to lock it, and now we are offsetting, we are moving from this column by the number of rows in this column, and we start from 0 to, in our example, 15. So how can we create sequence like this? Let's use row function, and we are looking at all rows, number of rows, and then we are subtracting the first row, so this one F4 to lock it, and based on that we will have sequence from 0 to the almost number of rows. So we have 16 numbers. Control Z, and based on this, because we are putting array into offset function will return arrays, multiple arrays, and we don't want to move any columns, so we can write 0 or omit this argument. And the height is very important because we have to put here 1. What this 1 means here? It means that we 16 times, based on row argument, moving from this column, and when we are moving, we just take one cell. So when we move 0 rows, we are just, let's say we are somewhere between cells, so somewhere between here, and then we are taking the only first column, first row, and then when we move 1 row each time in our sequence, we take each cells individually, but they combine into a bigger array. Okay, so we don't need the last argument, so just end function, and we have errors with my still formula. But when I'm in edit mode of the cell and I validate with F9 this formula, we have exactly collection column, Control Z, because offset function return reference to those cells, and when we have reference and when we use SUBTOTAL function, we can use count, so count A exactly, so function number 3, and our reference 1, so offset, and we close it, we can see only 1, so our helper column. And let's try to filter our data once more, autumn once again, and now our formula, SUBTOTAL formula, returns 0 with rows that are hidden, that are filtered, and the visible row, in our case will be 4th row, we can see 1, but because of the filters we don't see all rows, so let's remove filters, and because we have our helper column here, we just have to add some product function once again, and we should choose, so in parentheses we are looking at manager F4 locket, and we compare this to the current manager, so A2, and we are multiplying this by SUBTOTAL function, and here here parentheses, and we can count only visible cells, should be 16, and it is, but we talk about this, we want some number of projects, so we have to add one more array. So let's make it something like this, and new line, and this time on this column I need to add. Okay, so now it should be everything fine, everything. So all visible cells, sum of all visible values, and now once again this filtered, we have filtered values, yes, and we can try even with different collections, and will be also correct number of rows, and depending of what you need, you need just count the visible not filtered cells, or you need to add more condition, you can choose the proper formula for this.